It's good. It's very good.
How are you feeling?
All right. So many machines here. With the help of Hashem, we are learning PESACHIM Daf Nun Beis. We're going to start off today learning about the punishment meted out for violating the local custom of observing the second day Yom Tov if someone who arrived there did not keep the Yom Tov Sheni. And we're going to go back in the beginning of today's shiur to the Mishnah Daf Nun Amud Beis. The Mishnah, after speaking about the minhag of working, the minhag of not working on Erev Pesach before Chatzos, we went from there speaking about someone who transported Perei Shvi'is either from a place where those products depleted to a place where they did not yet deplete, or vice versa. And as we are learning that even though a person may not express ownership over the land during the Shemitah year, but a person can take a little bit of produce from his field, from his neighbor's field, it's all hefker, and they can eat it only up until the point where that species of food, that type of food is still available out there in the fields for the chayas, for the non-domesticated animals that eat things like this from nature. The moment it's kolu, that's a chaf lamed vav, the moment it's depleted for the chayas, a person is obligated to do biur, peiros, shvi'is, machloikes, Rambam, and Tosfos. Exactly what that means makes no difference for the teichen of our sugya over here. If I cannot keep it, I have to do biur. So again, mimakim lomakayim, I came from a place where this product is no longer available, or I arrived at a place where the product is no longer available. So the Tanakh said, well, the same concept. You have to be machmer. You got to be machmer. Rabbi Yehuda said the words which have to be understood. The words of Rabbi Yehuda is that we tell that person, or that person tells others, say v'havei l'cha afato. Go out and bring it yourself. Go out and bring it yourself. We're going to have many different ways of understanding the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Through this explanation of Rabbi Yehuda, we're going to define better what does it mean that the product can only be eaten if it's available out there in the fields. What does availability mean? We're going to quote the Mishnah in Shvi'is that says that shalosh arotzois lebir, that Eretz Yisrael is divided into three distinct regions for the purposes of establishing the time of biur. As we'll explain, really every area, every region has three sub-regions, which makes it into a total of 9. We're going to be asking, and we're going to be having a machlokes tanoim, if someone takes produce from Shemitah, from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz. B'chlal, taking it to Chutz La'aretz is problematic. We'll learn a Tosfos about it. But if that happened, and now the time of biur came about, do you have to bring it back to Eretz Yisrael to do the biur over there, whether the biur means burning it like the Rambam, whether the biur means putting it out and being mafked, or since you already brought it out, you can do biur where you are. And finally, we're going to be learning about the prohibition of cutting down a fruit tree. Now, let's just take a step back. B'chlal, we're not allowed to cut down fruit trees. However, we learned together there are various exceptions. For example, the Gemara in Bava Kama, Daf Tzadik Aleph says that if a person has a tree whose wood is more valuable than the fruits, then such a tree you can cut down for the wood. Or like the Gemara says in Bava Basra Daf Chavav, that if there is a tree, a fruit tree, that's producing a very small amount of fruit, however that's defined in halacha, there also, the prohibition of cutting down a fruit tree does not apply, but if it's the Shemitah year, if the tree has no fruits, and you're cutting down the tree for wood, no problem. But when you have fruits on the tree, even if your purpose of cutting down the tree is for the wood, but you are also destroying those fruits. And since the Torah says that on the Shemitah year, you can only take whatever you need la'achla, and Chazal learn la'achla v'loy lehefseid, so one may not chop down a fruit tree on the Shemitah year once the fruits on it reached a certain level of development. So we're going to be learning a little bit about what that level is. Again, braises, machlokes between Tanoim, and a lot more. So we left off on Daf Nun Beis Amud Aleph. Let's go inside to the third line from the top of the Amid. After we just finished off with the scenario where there were areas. This is still when the Chodesh was established al pi hara'iyah. B'hashgacha pratis, We're learning this in Tevis, Tafshan Pei Aleph. We're mamish learning these dinim now in Perek Echad L'Yom. Shluchei Beis Din got there. But there are certain areas that they would only get to the location during the month of Nisan because you have no Yomim Tovim prior to the 15th. But these are locations in which during the month of Tishrei, Shluchei Beis Din would not have enough time to reach there because on Rosh Hashanah and on Yom Kippur you may not travel. So certain regions, certain areas took upon themselves a chumrah that since when it comes to Sukkot, because they then had a suffix, they would therefore keep 2 days of Yom Tiv, not to differentiate between Sukkot and Pesach. They also kept 2 days Pesach. Other areas made no such chumrah. If they did not know during Tishrei, so then misafik, they kept 2 days. During Nisan, the shluchim of the Beis Din did arrive before the Yom Tov, they only kept 1 day. So we learned before about someone who traveled from a place where they only kept 1 day Yom Tov to a place where they kept 2 days Yom Tov. Now we're going to continue with such a scenario. Says the Gemara, Reb Nasan bar Asya, Ozel mi Beirav. He came from his yeshiva, from his rabbinic academy, and he traveled to Pumpadisa. This is a scenario where wherever the Beit Rav was, they would only keep 1 day Yom Tov. And then Pumpadisa, they would keep 2 days Yom Tov. And he got there on the 2nd day Yom Tov of Atzeres. In other words, the very fact that he traveled there on the 2nd day Yom Tov means that he was violating, he was only adhering to the minig from the place that he came from, and he wasn't careful to adopt the local minig of keeping 2 days Yom Tov. And indeed, Shamtei Rabbi Yosef, Oy Gewalt. Rabbi Yosef excommunicated him. Wow. So asks the Gemara, Amalei Abaye to Rabbi Yosef, why did you not, instead of putting him into a cherem, why did you not give him rabbinic malchus for violating the 2nd day Yom Tov? So Rabbi Yosef responds, because adifa of delay, I gave him a more severe punishment. No, it's the worst thing to violate the 2nd day Yom Tov. And how do I know that putting someone into cherem is even more severe than giving them malchus? Because the Bimarava in Eretz Yisrael, when they were debating regarding someone who violates a rabbinic law, not the law of 2nd day Yom Tov, which is viewed very stringently, but stam, if someone violates a rabbinic law, should he be punished by him receiving rabbinic malchus? Should he be punished by him putting into cherem? And Nimnu, they took a vote and they decided that Anegida, the Bar Beirav, that malchus, but Nimnu Ashamta, but there wasn't enough votes to say that elicits being put into cherem, which is a raya that cherem is even more severe. And being that the 2nd day Yom Tov is more important than other rabbinic laws, that was even then when they kept it as a doubt. Let me just add a detail. The Rebbe writes that after the calendar was established, so many people, they view, Minig Aviseinu B'Yodenu, even though now today we know when the 1st day Yom Tov is, it's only Minig Aviseinu B'Yodenu. They view this as a weak takana. The Rebbe says that Minig Aviseinu B'Yodenu makes the 2nd day Yom Tov now a lot more chamur the way it was in these stories. Because then the taka had a doubt. I'm not talking about exactly this case, because here we are learning it the way the Gilin Ashah says, that they came to a location where Adam really came. It was just a minig. But it's time just to know that in the times of Chazal, the 2nd day Yom Tov was based misafik. But after we established the calendar and the Chachamim made a takana, because of the minig Aviseinu B'Yodenu, for us to keep 2 days Yom Tov, now it's not called a safik day, it's called a vadai day. Truth is,
Rabbi, what about people who come from Israel on the 2nd day of Yom Tov to Chutz La'aretz? Many people only keep 1 day. What is the background of that?
That's mamish what we're learning about right now. Tzvika, this is the story.
I'm saying they do keep. Some of them keep 1 day.
No, I know that, Tzvika. I know that. I'm saying this is the big machlokes. You have the sheet of the Alter Rebbe. You should follow where your wife is. I'm saying that this is the story. I mean, if someone were to travel from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz, what they consider the 1st day Cholamoid and what we consider Yom Tov. And when you arrive, so you're not Bamidbar, you're good. But when you arrive to a place where they're keeping the 2nd day Yom Tov and you're breaking Yom Tov, you deserve the worst punishment for that. That's exactly what we're learning about.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Is it true that if you are traveling for 6 months out of Israel and you're coming back and you're doing only one Yom Tov, Rosh Hashanah, or
let's not do this right now, because you have so many different opinions and there's so many nuances. This is for a proper full hour halacha class.
Oh.
If a person is making these trips, ask it of. But the source of these sugyas is Pesachim, beginning with the Mishnah, Daf Nun Amud Beis, and here in Daf Nun Beis. Another version, that indeed Nagde Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef only gave this to Rabbi Nosson Malchus. And Amalei Abaye says, Neshamte Mar, why didn't you put him into a chedim? And why would I say that? Because when we just quoted that in Eretz Yisrael, they took a vote what to do with someone who violates a rabbinic law, and they decided only to give Malchus and not to put him into a chedim, that was only in Eretz Yisrael. But the Rav and Shmuel, who were the leaders of Bavel, they both say, that you excommunicate someone for violating the second day Yom Tov if they're not keeping it. So Amalei, to which Rabbi Yosef responds, Enachanami, here in Bavel, we mamish put someone in chedim for that. But Hanamili, inish da alma, a person, an amcha person. Hachi, over here, this Rab Nosson bar Asyas, to remember the Rabbanan, who he is considered the great Talmud Chacham. So therefore, Tavalei Avdi, I did something that's not so bad for him. I made it better for him. I only gave him Malchus. And again, how do I know that Malchus is considered the lesser punishment than a chedim? The Marava Minmu Anegida the Beibaravole Mimnu Ashamto is Araya that chedim is worse. But you see over here that the physical punishment is not as bad as a spiritual punishment. It's a davar apashit, but here we go that Ashamto, excommunicating someone, is worse than beating up than giving someone Malchus. Okay. Chevra, from here until the end of the daf and going into tomorrow, we're going to be learning about many dinim of Peiros Shvi'is. So the Mishnah said, Kayoytze boy. The point of the Mishnah was just to speak out the din, that if you're traveling from one place to another place, as we learned yesterday, there are two rules the Mishnah gave. Rule number one is keep the chamur minig, whether it's from the place that you came from, whether it's the place that you arrived. And din number two is make sure that what you do does not cause a machlokes. And Kayoytze boy hamelech Peiros Shvi'is. And Rabbi Yehuda said the words, you tell the person, say, v'havei l'cha af ato. Go and bring it for yourself. Pashut, what does Rabbi Yehuda mean? So the first understanding of Rabbi Yehuda, it will extrapolate this from the Gemara's Kasha. Says the Gemara, Felice, Leila Rabbi Yehuda, Had the Tanan, Rabbi Yehuda is rejecting the first rule in the Mishnah, which is Noisnin Olav Chumrei Hamakim Shiyatza Misham, the Chumrei Hamakim Shahalach Lisham. And as Rashi explains that the first understanding of Rabbi Yehuda is that we're speaking about a traveler, a newcomer. He came to a new place. In the new place, the crop, the product, what he has is already exhausted. It's kolum. So the locals are not eating it anymore because there it's no longer out there, lachaya, asher ba'artzecha, it's no longer out there in the fields. But the place from where he came was a place that this product is still in the fields. Okay. And the question is, can he eat it or not? So it sounds like Rabbi Yehuda is saying he can eat it. Why couldn't he eat it? Because it's not going to cause a machlokes. Why will it not cause a machlokes? If people are going to tell him, how can you eat it? Here, this item is not found. He can tell them, no, go to where I came from. Over there, it's out there in the fields. So since they also have access to it, not in their region, but in the region from where he came, they're not going to be instigated by it. They're not going to consider this person who Taka came from there doing something against the local minig. It's not going to cause a machlokes. So asks the Gemara that even if that is true, that people will accept his response, but the Mishnah gave two criteriums. One is not to cause a machlokes, but the first one is, if you come from one place, place A to place B, you have to behave like the more chamur one. So what does Rabbi Yehuda do with that? The bottom line is that in location B, in his newfound place, in his destination place, that item is no longer found in the fields. People are not eating it over here. So even if it won't cause a machlokes, ask the Gemara. But still, Rabbi Yehuda is rejecting that you have to follow the chumrah of whichever one is more chamur, you have to follow that. So because of this, Amar Rab Shisha Bereid Ravidi, Milsa Achriti Ka'amar Rabbi Yehuda, there's really a third case in the Mishnah that the Mishnah does not write explicitly. What were the first two cases in the Mishnah is? The first case of the Mishnah is that your origin are machmer, your destination is mekel, follow your origin. Second case, the Mishnah says your origin is lenient. In our case, because in your origin, that product is still out there in the field. It was not depleted. But your destination, your current location, is machmer. Again, follow the more chamur. And now there's a third case. This is going back to the Tanach. When you left your origin, when you took your product, that this type of food, it was not depleted yet. When you came to your current destination, here it's not depleted yet. But now that you arrived, this shama, you found out that in the place of origin, now this item is no longer there. It's depleted. It wasn't depleted when you took it, but now it's depleted. So the Tanach holds that you're still chayiv levayir, because I don't care whether when you took it, it was depleted. I care about right now. If right now in one of the two locations, in our case, in the place of origin, this item is no longer out there in the fields for the chayas, you have to destroy it. You have to do biur. And on that says Rabbi Yehuda, a leniency, no, that Omer, that he can say, understand something. When I left, if you would have been there, you also would have found this out there in the fields. Because when I left for holy kololuhu, so Rabbi Yehuda holds that even though now it's depleted, since when he took this product, at that time it was not yet kolul, he's allowed to eat it. Because you can view it like here, loy kolul, and there, loy kolul. And also there's no machlokes, because on the current location, it's loy kolul. Everyone is eating this product that is taken from this location. Problem with this pshat is, if this is a side of the Mishnah never spoke about this third case explicitly. Problem is that then Rabbi Yehuda is being the lenient one. So asks the Gemara Lamemra, if that's the pshat, that Rabbi Yehuda lekula ka'amar, when we have a tradition from Rabbi Lazar, that's the Gavaldik. He went when he learned Mishnayos with his teacher. Rabbi Lazar was told that Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah is the machmer. Before understanding what he means, his position has to be the stringent position. So therefore, your explanation does not work, but still, I'm going to accept the premise of your explanation, and that is that we have to add a third case in the Mishnah. Elamai, Epech, reverse it, that the Tanach holds, Eina Chayiv Levayir, because since when he left at that time, it was like Kolu in the place of origin, and now in the current location here, it's Bachlal Loi Kolu, not even now, then he can eat it. He's not creating a machlokes, and there's nothing to be machmer. And Rabbi Yehuda is the one that says that we tell this person that's trying to eat it, say, you know what? You think you can eat it? You came from another place. You came from a place of origin. Go back there right now and see if you can find any more. You won't be able to. So since you came from a place of origin, and right now in the place of origin, that product is not out there. So right now you can't eat it. You got to be machmer. Another approach. And the reason why we're going into another approach is because the Mishnah never gave a third case. So Abaya Amar Lo'ilam Kedektani means there's only two cases. Two cases means kolu here, kolu there. And v'hachi ka'amar oy mi makim shaloi kolu l'makim shekolu v'hechzira l'mekayman. Listen to what happened. The place of origin, you took apples. In the place of origin, you got apples. You arrived in a destination. In the current place. Weiter loy kolu. This product is there. Was not depleted. But then you went back to your place of origin. And when you came back to the place of origin, I'm sorry, I came from a place where you have apples in the origin. I came to a destination. In the destination place, there was no apples. Which means, you have to follow the more chomer place. On top of that, you can't make a machlokes. So for a moment, you had these apples in a place that since shekolu, you were not allowed to eat them. You would have to be mavayir it. You were not mavayir it. You went back to the place of origin. And when you came back to the place of origin, va'adayin lo'kolu, there the apples are still out there in the fields. Or do we say that since for a while you were in a location with this product where at that moment there was a chiyuv of biur, does it stick on it? Or do we say, no, when I took it, I was allowed to take it. Now I'm in a place, I'm back in the place of origin, adayin lo'kolu. So who cares if for a while I was in a place shekolum? So indeed, the Tanakh is lenient, and they say that in a chayv levayit. Rabbi Yehuda says no. That we tell him say no. You came. So he came from city A. He went to city B, and he came back to city A. So now that he's back in city A, they tell him, did you not come right now from city B? Go back to city B and see if you have those apples there. And now, so since he went through a place where kolu, even though he's not eating it there, he's not himself there, he returned. Now that product has to be biur. You have to do biur to that pedashrius. So says the Gemara Maskav Rabashi Rebbe. According to your understanding, what does Rabbi Yehuda hold? That Atu Agaba the Chamra Kaltino, were these apples, so to say, connected to location B simply because they were on the back of a donkey, just because they went through that town and you were there for a while? Why should it change the status of the fruit? Doesn't make sense. It's too big of a chumrah. You took it from a place, the loy kalu. You're currently back in that place, loy kalu. There's no machloikas. Just because it was there, mainly if it grew in location B. So it was niklat, it was connected to the ground in location B. It was just on the back of a donkey. It was in your suitcase. So Elam Ravashi, that the machloikas in the Mishnah is a whole different machloikas. And that is the pluta dahani tanoim. As we have a Mishnah, Gemara's quoting a Mishnah in Shvi'is, if a person preserves 3 kinds of vegetables in one barrel, Gavalik. So you have 3 different species of vegetables. You are pickling them together with vinegar, with fish brine, however they did it. And now you can already chap the issue. Again, this is on Shemitah. I didn't take a huge amount. I took the amount that's permissible to take into pickle. What's going to happen if any one of these 3 becomes depleted, but the others do not? How do they affect one the other? So here we have a 3-way machlokas tanoim. Rabbi Eliezer says, Oichlin al harishon. Says Rashi, look inside the Rashi, in the first widest line, in the beginning of the first, I go further up. 9 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Al harishon, al smach harishon hamamayir liois kolo lachayim and asoda. Which means that the moment any one of the 3 is depleted, you can't eat any of them. Why? Because they're all marinating together. Kavush, nach with vinegar. So you can only eat it if all of them are loy kalu. If one of them is kalu, you can't eat any of them. That's the chomer. That's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua is very lenient. Rabbi Yeshua says no, af al ha'achrein, which means that even if 2 out of the 3 are already kalu, as long as 1, even if only 1 is still found out there, is not depleted, you can eat it all. You can eat it all. It's very lenient. Now, how is that connected to our Mishnah? Here's the Rashi, the first widest lines in Rashi. That's 5 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Before we do that, let's read the 3rd sheet in the Mishnah. Rabbi Gamliel Omer, no. In the pickle jar, you have to differentiate the item that is depleted that you can't eat. You have to do biur. You have to burn it. You have to be mafkid it. But says Rabbi Gamliel that only you buy menachavis. But if the other types in this pickle, even though it's marinating together, if this one did not yet deplete, then you can eat it. In other words, you are allowed to eat one if this one, even though it's marinated with the juices, with the tam of the other, it doesn't matter when it comes to Shemitah. And furthermore, bahalacha like Rabban Gamliel. Now let's go into final. Let's go into Rashi, 5 lines before the bottom of the Amid. How are we connecting it to our Mishnah? Says Rashi like this, that the Tana, the Masnisim, and Rebbe Yehuda, behapligi. The Tanakama holds like the lenient shita of Rabbi Yeshua, who says that even if only one of these 3 items that you're pickling all together is available in the fields, you can have all of them. How do you see that in the words of the Mishnah? Now let's read Rashi's quoting the words of the Mishnah in the Tanakama, that if you came in makom shaloi kalu, lemakom shekalu kulan, the origin, all 3 are available. In your current location, he adds the word skulan. Only if all three are depleted, then are you chayev to be mavayed that pickle jar. But avol kolo mitzasam. But if you have three different things being marinated together and only some of them depleted, oichel af mimin hakola. Kid Rabbi Yeshua, you can eat all of them. Don't forget that in the place of origin, all three are still available. So the Tanakh is lenient, and the second line, in Rashi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no, say v'havilecha af ato ma'oisa min hasada. They tell him that you can't do that. You can't eat them. You want to eat one? Can you find it over here? And therefore what? Not therefore you can't eat anything. Not therefore you can't find anything. We're not saying that Rabbi Yehuda follows Rabbi Eliezer. We try to avoid that. The Gemara says many times that Rabbi Eliezer shamutahi, which means either that he was put into chedim, so we don't follow his opinion, or he follows the sheet of Beis Shammai, but we're going to follow at least the more chamor opinion of Rabbi Gamliel, that each item is viewed separately. So the machloikis in the Mishnah is really the machloikis that we have in Shvi'is, and now we're going to have a final approach how to understand the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. Ravina Amar, back in the Gemara, second to last line, beplukta dahanitanoi, bitnan, really this is a braisa. Oichlin bitamarin achi yichlo achlin shabitsoyar. If a person wants to eat dates, here we're starting to introduce this concept of, is it depleted in the field? Is it kolu? Really, we divide that it's Yisrael into three regions. One region is called Yehuda. So if I live in Yehuda and I want to eat dates on Shemitah, I want to take it off the tree and eat it. So the city of Tsoyar is the city that is blessed more than in other cities with dates. There's an abundance of dates there. So in any region that I am in Yehuda, I can still eat dates as long as in Tsoyar there's still one last palm tree that has some dates on it. So if a wild animal wants to chop some dates, they're going to find it. I can eat it anywhere else in Yehuda. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, turning to Daf Nun Beis Amid Beis. What happens? He says, if the dates on the trees are no longer there, but when they fell off the place from where they grew, they fell in the tree itself. Now, higher up in the trees, you have kippin, you have branches. Lower down in palm trees, you had some sort of thorny trunk. So he says like this, that oichlin al shel beina kippin, again, that if you have some dates available, even if the dates are not connected to the tree, but they fell off the place where they grow, but they fell into the branch area, into the leafy area. So an animal can go get it from there. You can still eat the dates that you have in your house. However, but if the dates that fell off their place from where they grew in the palm tree, and they fell down into the lower part of the trunk of the palm tree that has some sort of thorn-like projections, which makes it a lot harder for animals to go and take it from there, that does not allow you can no longer eat it. By the way, the Tanakh holds that even if it's there, bein hashitzin, since there was one tree in which there are still dates, even though practically an animal won't take it from there, but it's on the tree, you are still allowed to eat it. The time of biur did not yet arrive. Now here again, how is this connected to the machlokes in the Mishnah? So let's go into Rashi. Go into Rashi, 8 lines from the top of the Amid. Says Rashi, in the beginning of the line, umasnisen hachi ka'amar. Tanakh kola ligamri. Only you came from a place where dates are still found. You came from another region. Your destination, you are right now in a location where kala legamre. Kala legamre means that in this location, not only are there no dates on the trees, there aren't dates that fell off the trees into the branches. There aren't even dates that are bein hashitzin. That is when chayev levayir. But according to the Tanakh, who's the mekel in our Mishnah, even if there are no more dates that are to be found in between the branches, no more min hakipin, but va'adayin yesh beshitzin, but some dates are in the thorns towards the bottom of the tree. In other words, epis is there, same concept that the Tanakh holds, it has to be kolu ligamri, that ain't a chayv levayir. And Rabbi Yehuda says, you tell the traveler, whoa, 1 second. Here, the product is like kolu. In the place of origin, You can't say that it's loikolu. Go bring more. You cannot go into the area in the tree where there are thorns, you're going to get cut. So since you would not take it, so yes, the place of origin is considered kolo. And here we go back to the rule that even if you're not causing a machlokes, you have two criterions. Number one, never cause a machlokes. Number two, if either one of the places, either the origin or the current place, is going to be machmer, you have to follow the chumrah, and he considers the place of origin to be depleted. Because it's not practical to take dates out of its thorns. In other words, Rashi concludes, Ula chumrah amra Rabbi Yehuda. So this is aligned with the tradition we have from Rabbi Elazar. This is a total of 6 ways of understanding the machlokes in our Mishnah. We are on Daf Nun Beis, Amud Beis, second line from the top of the Amud. Now we're going to start learning Bechlal rules when it comes to peiros of Shvi'is. Like we mentioned many times already, the concept of kala is it depleted? Depleted where? Depleted out there. So out there means, as the Mishnah Tanan Hassan, shalosh arotzois lebir. This din that you only have to do biur on the peiros if it's no longer available where? Divide the Holy Land into 3 regions. What are the 3 regions? Yehuda, number 2, Ever Hayarden, and number 3, the Golul. Says the Mishnah weiter, in truth, each one of these 3 regions has 3 subdivisions, be'emes. Ushalosh arotzois b'chol achas v'achas. What that really means is that Hashem made the beauty of Eretz Yisrael is that every one of these regions naturally have 3 different types of lands. You have mountainous lands, you have lowlands, you have valleys, and they're very different. We know in Eretz Yisrael in a very short amount of time. Mamish, you go to the snow, you go to the desert. So every one of these 3 has 3 different types of areas. And by the way, since they're naturally very different, the mountains are cold and they're lowlands and you have valleys. So obviously what is growing there, what's available there changes accordingly. So there are 3 general regions, and each one of these 3 has another 3 divisions. There are 3 subdivisions, which really means that Eretz Yisrael is divided into 9 regions. So right away, the Mishnah is asking on itself. If you're telling me that each one, Yehuda and Ever Hayarden and the Golul, each one has shalosh arotzes themselves, so v'lamru amru shalosh arotzes labir. So say there are 9 arotzes labir. So the Mishnah says, no, we do not say 9 arotzes. What we are dafka saying is that if, let's say, you are in the Yehuda region, even though Yehuda is really divided into 3 different types of land, and you are living in one of those in Yehuda where this product is no longer in the fields, if in any other one in the 2 of Yehuda it is available, you can still eat it. You're not chayiv to do biur. When are you obligated to do biur of peiros shvi'is? Only if in your region none of the 3 have it anymore. End of Mishnah. Says the Gemara Minah. How do we know all this? How do we know that even though if I'm in Yehuda and I'm in a mountainous area, and in the mountains, this product is no longer to be found? I don't care. Since in another area that's very different, has a different type of geography, but since it's called in Yehuda, I'm still allowed to eat it. Where do we get that from? And mitzat sheni, if I'm in Yehuda and the product is not available nowhere in Yehuda, but it's available in the Galil, how do you know that I cannot eat it? Where does this come from? So Amar Rav Chama bar Ukva, Amar Rav Yosi bar Chanina, Amar Kro. When it says in the pasuk in Bahar that we quoted yesterday that ul behemtecha, that peiros shvi'is can be given to your animals, and by the way, doesn't the behemtecha, in that is included the person, which we may eat it at home for us, for our domesticated animals, ul lachaya asher ba'atzecha, and for animals that are out there in the field. So, and the word artzecha teaches us kol zman shechaya oichelos min hasada, if this item, if this type of food or vegetable is out there in the fields, then, only then, ha'achel lebehema shebabayis. And again, lebehema means for you can eat it in your house, you can feed it to your animals in your house. But the moment, kala lachaya asher basada, then, kale lebehem techa min abayis. Now, the word sada, I get. Achaya means that it's not domesticated. But what's the ba'artzecha? Oh, In your land, says the Gemara Gemidi, we have a tradition. The Ein Chayes of Yehuda Gedel al Perish Begol. Chayes that are out there in the region of Yehuda, they don't travel to Golol to find a certain food. They don't go that far. It's about distance, Rashi says. Likewise, the Ein Chayes of Begol Gedel al Perish Yehuda. Rashi says that Ein Chayes of Yehuda misrakeches kol kach lotzis mi Yehuda legolol umegolol Yehuda. But on the reverse, Rashi says an animal will go from one region, from one sub-region in Golol to another sub-region in Golol. You know, it's amazing. In other words, you look at nature and you'll see that Chayes in Eretz Yisrael stick to 3 different places. Amazing. Not the world without borders. In Beteva, there are borders. So that's the Ba'artzecha. So the animals, Gavaldik, the lion in Yehuda doesn't krich the Golol to eat. That's how we know that Yehuda is one area, but in Yehuda itself, it will go from the mountain to the valley. Another rule. If a product, if a peta that grew in Shemitah was taken to Chutz La'aretz, and the time of Biur arrived. Why did the time of Biur arrive? Because in the place of origin, in Eretz Yisrael, this peta is depleted. So now the question is, not if you have to do Biur, that we learned in the Mishnah. You came from one place, your destination is a new place, whichever place is more chamor, you have to follow. B'chlal on Chutz La'aretz, there's no dinei Shemitah. All we care about is, what's the status of this type of food in the place of origin, but question is, do you have to bring it back to Eretz Yisrael to do biur? Or can you do biur in its location? Oh. So says the Braisa, no need to return the produce to Eretz Yisrael. However, Rab Shimon ben Elazar, no, he's the machmir. You have to take it back to the place of origin, and only there, the Yizba'aru, will you remove it. Again, Lanambam, you'll have to burn it. Letoisis and other Rishonim, you'll have to put it outside and declare it hefker, and you, like everyone else, can take it back, but it has to be done, limikayman, and it has to be brought back to Eretz Yisrael. And what's the source of Rab Shimon ben Elazar? Because it says Ba'artzecha. So the Ba'artzecha is teaching you where you have to do the biur. Now we have a problem. We just learned from the word Ba'artzecha that we follow the nature of the chayes in Eretz Yisrael, and they keep to 3 different regions. So we learned from the Ba'artzecha already that Shalish Aratzes Labir. Asks the Gemara of Apikte, isn't the Ba'artzecha already used? Answers the Gemara, no. That Kari Bey, that the Torah could have only written Ba'aretz. That would have sufficed to say Shalish Aratzes Labir. The Ba'artzecha is another additional letter, and from that we can Rab Shimon ben Elazar can learn the din that Yachzer Olam Ekayman. Inami that taka Ba'aretz, no, Ba'artzecha is not 2 extra words; it's 1 extra word. But the word Asher, right? That R could have been avoided. So from Ba'asher and Ba'artzecha, we have 2 sources to learn both of these din. Okay, Bekitzer, my friends, we have a Machlokas Tanoim. Says the Gemara Rab Safra. Once, Nafak Meretz Yisrael Chutz La'aretz. He went on a trip, and the Hava Bahadei Garba the Chamer the Shvis. He had a barrel of wine. Happened to be that this is wine that came from grapes that grew in Eretz Yisrael, and it's Shemitah. So this is a case. Now, before we go on, look inside the last Taisus in the Amid. Rab Safran Apik Garba the Chamer Meretz Chutz La'aretz Hikshariva. How was even he allowed to do that? Notice that we had in the Braisa Machloikes. Maybe the Braisa was not speaking about Ayid Tzadik, but we're speaking about Rab Safra. Dotanan the Perigvav of the Shvi is says Toisvis all the way at the end. Ein moitziin shemen tzreifo Perek Shvis min ha'aretz l'chutz la'aretz. Guys, you know, we're all aware what happens with the Esroigim that grew on Shemitah. It's not so pashut to remove Peres. B'chlal you can't remove it. So V'tiritz, this is what the Riva answers, that the Mishnah over there in Shvi is speaking about someone that took out a peta to eat it. That is what you are not allowed to do. However, Rab Safra took out this barrel of wine, apik l'schoiram. Notice he wanted to show them the product that he's making. And if you take out a product to do business, you are allowed to do that. There are many that have actually a different girsa in the Tosfos, but in Kanamakim. Anyways, the Tosfos just wants to point out, there are scenarios where you are allowed to take from Eretz Yisrael Pedai Shvi'is L'chutz La'aretz, or Tosfos says at the end, maybe B'shoigi Kaitziu. And a Chanami, you're not allowed to do it, but he did it. So he has a barrel of wine back in the Gemara. And he knew, by now, there are no more grapes. There are no more grapes in the region where I came from. Now, Rav Safra was together with two of his Talmidim. Lavu Bahadei, back in the Gemara, Rav Huna Bered Ravika, and Rav Kahana. So he was consulting with his Talmidim, what do I need to do? In other words, do I have to bring it back like Rav Shimon ben Elazar, or can I be lenient like the Chacham? So Amaluhu, Ikel, the Shmiya Leimi Neid Rababohu, see all three of them, Rav Safra, Rav Huna Bered Ravika, and Rav Kahana were all Talmidei of Rabbi Abahu. Do you guys remember from our teacher whether he paskin like Rav Shimon ben Elazar, which is a chumrah, which means I got to schlep myself back to Eretz Yisrael, or not? So Rav Kahana remembered Amar Lei, Rav Kahana Hachi Amar Rababo. Yeah, Rababo was Machmed. Halachi Rav Shimon ben Elazar. Yachzeru lemekayman. Rebbe Leben, let's go back to the Holy Land. Amar Lei Rav Huna ben Ravika. No, the other one said no. I remember the opposite. Amar Rababo. So what do you do now? Each one was quoting Rabbi Abo. The one that's more convenient for Rav Safra to listen to was to Rav Huna ben Ravika. It's more convenient to say that Ein Halacha K'Rabbi Abo. And indeed, Amar Rav Safra, you know what? Let's accept the memory of Rav Huna. Why? Not because it's more convenient to me, but because Rav Huna, the Dayik v'Gomer Shmaitzah Mepumeh Derabe, that whenever Rabbi Bohu, who was their teacher, taught something, Rav Huna was the one that used to ask the teacher, Rebbe, please repeat it. I want to get all of the words of what you're saying correct. So he was a lot more careful to be Medayik B'Lashoin of the Rav, so we can rely more on him. And he is similar, like Rachava, in Pompadisa, that Rashi writes, also was very medagdik when it came to whatever teaching was said. Rachava was very medayik to know exactly the words of what was said. So when he says something, we rely on him. For example, the Amar Rachava, that Amar Rav Yehuda had Habayis stuff full, that Harabayis was surrounded within its walls with a double row of benches, stav lefnim stav, one row inside the other. It's not negay. By the way, we had this above in the Masechta, but the point is that this statement that Harabayis had in it stadium type of benches with a covering, so when people got there, they were able to sit down and to rest and to be protected from the elements. There was for a long time a debate who said that, Rebbe Yehuda or Rav Yehuda. That was the question. So when Rachava said that Rav Yehuda said it, everyone relied on Rachava. Why? Because that was the type of Rachava was someone that when he learned, he didn't only chop the content. He was very careful to get all of the words memorized. So he's saying, Rav Safra is saying that Rav Huna is the same way. So since Rav Huna remembers Ein Halacha, I'm relying on him. Not because I want to be lenient, but because he's the one that knows more. And he was criticized. So Kari Alei Rabbi Yosef, the fact that there was another Talmud. He asked also Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana remembered that Rabbi Bo says the halacha is like Rav Shimon ben Elazar. So Rabbi Yosef says, it says in a pasuk in Hosea, the pshat of this pasuk is about people, God forbid, going after idol worship. That Ami be'etzo yishol, that my people, they inquire of wood. Avodah zarah. Umakloi, and their sticks tell them what to do. That's the pshat. So he said that kol hamekaloi magadloi, that he's a person that when he has a question, you go rabbi shopping, and what are you waiting for? You're waiting for someone to be lenient and say, oh, that's it. That he's asking one and asking the other, and the one that was mekol magadloi, he's the guy that has it right. Rabbi Yosef was not happy with Rav Safra's acceptance of Rav Huna and not justifying it. Rav Huna was more medayik. Rabbi Yosef did not want to hear any of that. Weiter. Says the Gemara. Another story. Rabbi Eloi, he was kotz kafneyasa the shvis. He would, on Shemitah, we cannot properly harvest the fruits. We certainly cannot destroy the fruits. Either take what you need and eat it now or leave it on the trees. But he needed firewood. So he would cut down a palm tree, even though on the palm tree, the dates were not fully developed. That then he would not be allowed to cut down the tree, but they began to develop. They were called kafniyasas. They were called berries. He did not consider that fruit yet. And he allowed himself, he said, there's no fruit yet. He would then cut down those trees when he needed to, as we mentioned in our intro. Cutting down fruit trees, b'chlal, is very problematic, but we have some exceptions, right? We quoted from Bava Kama, from Bava Metzia, from Bava Basra. I mean, here we're speaking about a case that if it not would have been Shemitah year, he would be allowed to cut down a fruit tree. Let's just say that he was in a location where the value of the wood was a lot more valuable than the fruit, even though fruit grows every year. Still, the wood was that valuable. You are allowed to cut down these trees for its wood. Problem was that it was on a Shemitah year, and there was underdeveloped, immature berry dates on the trees. So the question is, Rabbi Eloi, how was he even allowed to do that? When the Torah says, Lo achla amar achmana, v'lo lehefseit. And now that there were already fruits on the trees, taka the very little, but had he left it there, it would have grown. And when you're cutting it down for firewood, you're destroying it. And that when do we say that perhaps that you're not allowed to be mafsid peiros if they are already fully matured and developed? But if there's already a berry, there's something there, but it's not a fruit, it's not yet edible, it's not developed, then there is no issa. No. Amarav Nachman, Amarav Baravua. Hani maschale de orlom. When you have again dates that are growing in an earlier state, when the date is not yet mature, you have a certain type of husk-like coverings that covers those fruits. Now, we're not speaking about Shemitah, we're going to Inyan, we're speaking about Orla. So Rav Nachman is saying that those husks are like fruit. Guys, Orla is only an Isur on the fruit. By Orla, you can have Hana'ah, and you can make benefit from the tree. So how do you view, again, when the dates began to develop, there was a certain klipa that was woody, that would cover it. What is that? Is that tree or is that peiros of Orla? Can you benefit from it or not? Because Orla is even asur b'hana'ah. So Rav Nachman says that hani maschalei de Orla, they are fruit, asiri. Why? Because hoyil v'nasu shomer lepeidi. Since the reason why Hashem made in nature that when dates are very little, they have this type of covering, it's in order to keep them protected, so they have a status like a fruit. Now hold on, says the Gemara. The shomer lepeidi emas have. Hashem made in the nature of the dates that once the date is developed, there's nothing covering it. You take it off the tree and you eat it. The only time that you have this maschale, the only time that you have this klipa around the date is only bikufre. It's only when the dates are underdeveloped, when they're still only berries. Yet, what are we saying? Rav Nachman is calling the klipa shomer lepeide. So even when you have a date that's in its berry state, when it's underdeveloped, it's already considered a fruit. And coming back now to Shemitah, since it is considered a fruit, how is Rabbi Eloi allowed to cut a tree down? So the Gemara says that Rav Nachman is one thing, and Rabbi Eloi is someone else. And both of them really goes back to Machlokes Tanoim. Rav Nachman obviously paskins like the Tana Rabbi Yossi, the Tanan, Mishnah here in Arlom. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Samadar is grapes. So you have in the development of a grape, there's a Samadar. Samadar is like when it's a bud, it's a grape bud, just to get the words. After it's called a samadar, then it becomes boiser. It's not developed yet, but it's larger, and then you have the proper grape. So Rabbi Yossi says that samadar, even in the earliest state, when it's only a little bud, aser mipnei shohu peidei. However, that's only shitas Rabbi Yossi, that we consider the smallest development of a grape as a peda, but the Chachamim argue with Rabbi Yossi. So fine. So Rav Nachman, who paskins like Rabbi Yossi, he will say the maschale the arlos taka consider the peda shomer lepede because he holds those dates to be qualified as fruits. Rabbi Eloi will hold like the Chachamim samadar is garnished. It's considered part of the wood, and in his case, when he was cut those palm trees. The date that was on there was not considered a date. He considers that part of the tree. And a tree, you can cut down trees on Shemitah to enjoy the wood. Has nothing to do with fruits. Says the Gemara Nish. No. No. There's something taki unique about grapes. By grapes, there is a machlokes tanoim, but not by other trees. How do I know that? Tanan, another Mishnah in Shvi'is. This is clear. This is the topic that we're speaking about. When the Torah says that la'achla v'lo lahefseit, on the other hand, there's no isur cutting down a tree on the Shemitah year. So the Mishnah is asking, if you have some fruits that are beginning to sprout, they're beginning to develop from the tree, from what point do you say this is a fruit? Mamash a Mishnah. So by Shama Yoimrim, Kol Hoilonis Misha Yoitziu, that the moment there is some fruit coming out, you already cannot cut down the tree, even though Rashi over here says that Yoitziu goes on the leaves, but there's another Rashi that says it's speaking about the fruit. Let's learn that Beishamai says if there's any of the fruit, a bud, a epis, it's already a fruit, then you can't cut down the tree because you're ruining the fruit. However, it depends. The fruit has to not only be there, but it has to be developed. Maybe not fully developed, but it has to reach at least a certain point. And he goes through details. When it comes to charuvim, when it comes to carobs, to buxer, it's only misha yashar shiru. In other words, that the carobs, only after they develop a little bit more, do they look like chains. They begin to interlace with each other. When they come out of the tree, they don't look like this chain. Only from that point onwards. The hagefanim, when it comes to grapevines, daf nun gimel, this is all shitas beis Hillel, then misha yigareyu, from when they reach the size that we call girua. We'll see soon in the Gemara what size is that, not earlier than that size, not like Beishamai. Likewise, zaysim, when is zaysim considered a fruit? And therefore you can't cut down the branches of the wood. Mishiyonetsu, when they reach the level called nates, we'll see what that nates is. Visharkoloilanes, only in the other trees, Mishiyoitziu. By the other trees, Beis Hillel is moided to Beishamai. Okay, so now, for Amar Rabasi, first of all, when Beis Hillel says Misha Yigoreyu, what level is that? We learned on Amud Aleph the smadar. It's not smother. He says that who boy said who gerua, who pull alavin. He makes it clear that the state of gerua is when the grape is larger. Smadar is a bud. We know that boiser is larger. He links yigoreyu to boiser. How large is that? It's like a white bean. Who pull halavin? It's a white bean. The Gemara says, pull halavin salkadaita. Who's talking about a bean? We're speaking about a grape. Ela ema shiurai kip pull halavin. Good. So now, says the Gemara, man shamat leida amar boiser in smadar loy. Obviously, this Mishnah cannot be Rabbi Yossi, because Rabbi Yossi, we learned on Amud Beis, and Daf Nun Beis, Amud Beis holds that even smadar is considered a peder. So obviously, who is the shita? The shita is the Rabbanan. And Einechanami when it came to Gefanim, Einechanami when it came to Charuvim, only at a later time do we consider that a fruit. Yet, Vikatani Shar Kol Hoilonois, we are Moida to Shitas Beishamai, which is Misha Yoitziu. Here we're speaking about dates. Dates is not mentioned in this Mishnah. So even the Rabbanan will hold that by a date from the earliest point on, that is already considered a fruit. So we're back to the kasha. How is Rabbi Eloi allowed to cut the tree down? So the Gemara answers, Ella Rabbi Eloi bidin nischani cuts. He was cutting down a male palm tree. You know about that? There are many trees that are males. Some of the trees that are males, b'chlal, don't give fruit. But many trees, like date trees, the female tree is a tree that the fruit becomes fully developed on the tree. Just a matter of leaving it there enough time. A palm tree will develop dates. Those dates will never become matured on the tree. It actually goes into details what you need to do. You have to take it off the tree. When it's never going to ripen there. And you have to make baskets from the leaves of these trees. And when you put it in it, then it develops. You know, I know in my backyard I have an avocado tree. Never develops on the tree. Never develops on the tree. If you take it off the tree, I put it in a brown bag. Maybe that's all the chvesish. Maybe it's a male tree. In other words, it's from a type of tree that they never fully develop. And therefore, when you have a tree that the fruits on that tree, a female tree, will come to full ripeness, even when the date is in its smallest level of development, it's completely underdeveloped. It's already considered the fruit. Already considered the fruit, according to everyone. And then Rabbi Eloi would not be allowed to cut a tree down. But if it's a male tree, when you have a tree that the fruits will never fully mature on the tree, that tree, you are allowed to cut down the tree for the wood. You can't say you're cutting down petas, since the petas, as they are, will never come to be a final product. So they're never considered a peta. If it's not considered a peta, then it's not included in the isur of lo'achla v'loy lehefsid. Chavra, we'll stop over here. God willing to be continued.
Yeah.
Guys, there's a little bit more just to know of Shemitah until the Mishnah. The beauty about this Perek is that we're going to go completely away from Pesachim, because as you can already see in the next Mishnah, we're going to go to all sorts of minhagim, which is going to be fascinating. The first daf we're going to learn Sunday morning at 6 a.m. is going to be Mamash Agadata. Amazing. You can see over here. And Bekitzer, we're going to go minhagim. Segeta minhagim. All right, to be continued.
Thank you.